All right, so Narendra Modi 3.0 is here in office. It is, of course, at the head of a coalition government with a reduced majority. But nonetheless, Mr. Modi becomes the first Prime Minister after Jawaharlal Nehru to get a consecutive third term. How may the world view him differently, or is it going to be the same as they did over the last 10 years? And how may India in this third term view the challenges that the world will throw at it in the next 5 years? Joining us now is one of the world's foremost foreign policy commentators, the host of Fareed Zakaria GPS on CNN, and the author of the latest book, The Age of Revolution. Fareed Zakaria, thank you very much for speaking with us here on CNN.
My pleasure, Zaka.
So let me start with, when the results came on the 4th of June and the seat count of Mr. Modi's party was reduced by a 60-odd and the NDA alliance was reduced substantially from what they were predicting, what they were hoping. What was your first reaction? What was going through your mind when you saw those results? Because no one was quite prepared for that.
I think more than anything else, it gave me an enormous sense of pride and confidence in Indian democracy, in the sense that whatever, and this is honestly true, regardless of what you think of Narendra Modi and his policies, but the idea that a sitting prime minister who is enormously popular, who uses his governmental power to promulgate his image, who has outspent the opposition by God knows 10 to 1, maybe more, was chastened by this vast public, many of them poor, many of them illiterate. It just gave you a sense that Indian voters have the strength, the capacity, the power to look through, see through propaganda, see through money that's spent. And in a sense, they were voting for checks and balances, for limitations on authority. I wouldn't overread the election. I don't know what it says about Hindutva, and we can get into that. But what they were really saying is, let's have a little more balance in the system. And I think that's admirable. And frankly, it's extraordinary to see this coming from India's electorate, this reassertion of kind of liberal democracy and checks and balances. Well, you weren't seeing it from India's elite. You weren't seeing this. These people have had more courage than a lot of the people I know in India's most gilded drawing rooms.
I do want to ask you, yes, you're absolutely right. It's a message loud and clear to the incumbent. They perhaps want a chastened government, a government with checks and balances. But all said and done, it's been 2 weeks now since those results came. Mr. Modi is very much in the saddle. He's got a third straight term, the first Prime Minister ever in India to equal that record of Jawaharlal Nehru. How would you read that milestone, though?
It's important, which is why I say I wouldn't overread it. Modi is an enormously important figure in Indian history. He is, as I've said, the most important prime minister probably since Nehru, and you can't take that away from him. That the accomplishment is real, but in a sense we are returning to a more normal post-Nehruvian politics in India, which is to say, once the Congress party lost its dominance, its kind of extraordinary dominance of Indian politics in the 1970s. Since then, we have really had mostly coalition governments, right? If you look after the emergency, after the rise of the Janata Dal,
yeah.
What you have had is coalition governments, except on 3 occasions. After the death of Indira Gandhi, because of the sympathy wave, after the death of Rajiv Gandhi, because of a sympathy wave, and Modi. So, in a sense, what it seems like is what the new norm, the new normal of Indian politics for 50 years has been coalition governments. And we are returning to that. And that Modi was able to bend the curve but not break it.
I know you did say earlier on that you don't want to read too much into the Hindutva aspect. But I do want to ask you, because Mr. Modi's first 2 terms, both in 14 and in 19, were built on winning big in the biggest state in the country, in Uttar Pradesh. But the fact that his party has lost half the seats that it won last time, this time around, and more importantly, it lost in Ayodhya, where the Ram temple was built, and they were hoping to ride on the frenzy of the inauguration of the Ram Temple. What does that tell you?
I'm trying to think this through, Zaka, and the reason I say I don't want to read too much into it is because I need to read more, analyze more, talk to more people. I think honestly, it's not entirely clear to me that this vote was some kind of a resounding rejection. I myself feel like the Hindutva is an overdone weaponization of a religion, which I don't think is appropriate. So I would like to believe that the public is rejecting it. But, you know, look, the BJP's vote share was still 37%, which is roughly what it's been before. The opposition got its act together and forced a one-on-one contest in many places, or close to one-on-one. So the anti-BJP vote didn't get fragmented as it had in the last two elections. They did, in fact, do well in other places. As you say, UP is, UP, Maharashtra, and the South are the kind of the places where they didn't do well. So I need to understand it a little bit better. And I think in UP there was the kind of split between Amit Shah and Yogi. So how much of that were tactical issues? I would like to believe that Indians understand that Hinduism is a deeply tolerant, pluralistic religion that celebrates diversity, that does not lend itself to be weaponized into a kind of martial religion that is, persecuting minorities. I don't know. I think that we need a little more evidence to be sure.
I do want to ask you, the opposition's been saying, Mr. Modi has never run a coalition government, either as his time as chief minister in Gujarat for the 10 plus years that he was there, or as prime minister in the last 10 years. So they're saying that he won't be able to, manage the pulls and pressures of a coalition government, and therefore this government will not survive. Do you buy that?
He's a very shrewd, smart politician. And if you're betting, you'd have to bet that he'll figure out a way to make it work. It is true, it goes against his DNA. He's a very autocratic, authoritarian type. I mean that even within the BJP. I mean, if you look at it's ironic, you have the complete transformation of roles. The Congress party used to be thought of as a court, highly centralized, kind of dynastic, and the BJP was more of a grassroots organization powered by, the people, at the bottom, the cadres. Right now, the BJP has turned into a super court, with decisions really coming all the way from the top. And the Congress has actually managed this coalition of its almost a kind of coalition of equals very well. So it may well be that he has more trouble than we might expect. He's a smart guy. He's going to figure out, I think, how to do it. But it does go against his DNA.
I do want to ask you what this verdict means for the challenger on the other side, Rahul Gandhi. For all practical purposes, the leader of the Congress party. Incidentally, Wednesday this week was his birthday. He turned 54. He's been in active politics for the last 20 years. And for much of that time, he's been sort of lampooned. He's not been taken seriously, particularly by the BJP. Do you think this election has settled that debate, that Rahul Gandhi is not just a serious politician, he's perhaps the numero uno challenger to Mr. Modi?
I think so. I think Rahul Gandhi has matured enormously in the last 5 or 6 years, maybe the last 10 years. And I think you see in him a kind of weightiness, experience. You see somebody who I really do think has gained enormously from traveling the country and meeting with people. And you see an enormous amount of empathy when he talks about people, and he talks about people who are really excluded, marginalized. I frankly think it's commendable that there would be so much focus on, people forget, but India still has hundreds of millions of people who feel very left out of this picture of kind of a glittering, shining India. And to be reaching out to them, to be their voice, to be the voice for vulnerable people, it's very commendable. He's doing it well. He will have to continue to manage this coalition very skillfully, because I don't think the Congress is going to be able to make, a kind of comeback on its own as a majority party. But that too, he seems to be handling very well. So I think, yeah, the simple answer to your question is, yeah, I think he is he's the leader of the opposition in every sense of the word.
I do want to ask you about a couple of foreign policy questions. Mr. Modi was at the G7 last week in Italy. He seemed to be the toast of that summit. How does this mandate? He's got 60 seats less than last time. How may that change the way the U.S., Canada, Britain, France, Germany, Italy, the way they view him, the way they viewed him over these last 10 years? Would that necessarily change because of this diminished mandate?
No, it won't. First of all, I mean, there are many of them are in coalition governments themselves. But more importantly, look, the United States and the Western world in general have made a strategic decision to try to move closer to India over the last 20 years. I mean, the pivotal moment is really under George W. Bush and Manmohan Singh with the nuclear deal. That marked the real sea change. Ever since then, every administration has been trying to deepen the relationship with India, work better with New Delhi. And that won't change at all. The fact that he has to preside over a coalition government won't really change that. There are larger issues of whether or not India wants to participate as fully in that kind of an alliance. But from the point of view of Washington and Western capitals, they have made a strategic structural decision, largely because of the rise of China, but for other reasons as well. The end of the Cold War, the end of of putting India in that camp, and for those structural reasons are really the overwhelming motor for the better relations between the West and India, and that was true before Narendra Modi. It'll be true after him. And so, being the head of a coalition versus heading up the BJP alone it's not really that important.
I do agree with you 100% when you say for structural reasons, surely the West will continue to be on India's right side and India will be on the right side of the West. But there are niggling issues as well, whether it's India's slightly different stand on the Ukraine war, continued purchases of Russian oil, even on Israel-Hamas. India was one of the first countries to come out and pretty unequivocally condemn the terrorist attack. And now increasingly, you have this whole wedge around the Khalistan issue. How much do you see that becoming a problem in Mr. Modi's third term?
There are some of these issues. Some of them, by the way, have been navigated quite well. You know, the issue of India buying Russian oil has not been a big problem. Washington has been very understanding of it. When I've traveled to Ukraine, I've found them to be more upset, and I've had to explain to them that if the Indians didn't buy Russian oil, the price of oil would go to 200. There'd be a recession in the West, and they would lose a lot of Western support. So you know, it's more. Washington has actually understood that. The Khalistan issue, honestly, Washington is sort of puzzled as to why a government as important and sophisticated as India's would be doing this kind of thing. That has been what I notice is officials in Washington are more puzzled and bewildered and stumped as to what is going on and what they feel it's an issue that can be managed because it's not a first order issue. It is, as you put it, a niggling issue, and they will handle it. But it has led people to wonder. There seems to be a kind of obsession that is unworthy of a great country like India, and so they've been trying to kind of figure it out. And hiring hit squads in foreign capitals to do this kind of thing is not exactly what that's not been a large part of India's history. So why are they doing it now? There is puzzlement about that, but it's not a first order issue.
And one final word, of course, I guess the first order issue, whether it's for India or for the United States, is this great power competition with China. In India's case, it's more proximate because there's an ongoing border situation for the better part of the last 4 years. And this week, we've had a U.S. congressional delegation led by former Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, meeting with the Dalai Lama. China, of course, has said not so particularly charitable things about it. How do you see that playing out in Mr. Modi's third term?
Well, what's interesting to me about all of that is the Chinese have really made very few overtures to Modi. If you go back to the beginning of Modi's term in office, Modi was very, I wouldn't call him pro-Chinese, but he was encouraging of the relationship, wanted to deepen the relationship, put a lot of time into it, and that was at the heart of his kind of multi-aligned policy. The Chinese did not return the favor, and in fact, in many ways, it reminds me of the fate that befell Jawaharlal Nehru when he talked about Hindu, Chini, Bhai Bhai, and then the Chinese invaded in 1962. So what you're seeing is a China that, for whatever reason, has a kind of adversarial relationship with India. Look, China has had 16 border disputes with its neighbors. It has largely solved 15 of them. The one country with whom it has not solved its border dispute or tried even seriously to address it is India. So there's something going on there where on the Chinese side, there is less desire for this kind of better relations. So that leaves India, in my opinion, thinking it should leave India thinking, where should we put our bets? Where should we, place ourselves? And I think it would be much better for India to have a deep strategic, economic, technological, military relationship with the West. I think it's drifting in that direction. I think it could be more proactive and aggressive in moving in that direction and reap enormous benefits for the average Indian person. A much deeper, stronger technological and economic relationship with the U.S. would do more to boost Indian growth than almost anything else.
All right, Fareed Zakaria, the host of GPS on CNN and now the author of the latest book, Age of Revolutions. Thank you very much for your time and your insights. Thank you.